ahead.
Our mission, Helping Parents Heal, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting parents whose children have passed. Through support and resources offered, we aspire to help individuals become shining light parents, meaning a shift from a state of emotional heaviness to one of hopefulness and greater peace of mind. Helping Parents Heal goes a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and afterlife evidence in a non-dogmatic way. Helping Parents Heal affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non-religious background, and encourage open dialogue. Attendance at this meeting is voluntary. We hope that participants will learn from and share with each other. Discussions here are confidential and not designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Zoom meetings run by leadership are not confidential. These meetings typically feature guest presenters and are posted on YouTube so that affiliate members worldwide can watch and benefit. Neither type of Helping Parents Heal meeting is designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers, allowing parents to learn about many possible ways to heal. This includes presenters covering progressive topics such as afterlife evidence and connecting with our children who've passed. The views expressed by our guest speakers may or may not reflect the opinions of Helping Parents Heal leaders and members, so we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you could be here with us this evening, and thank you, Stephen, for being here.
Thank you for
Yes,
inviting me.
thank you so much, Stephen. And we feel very grateful that you've already been on here before, back, I guess, closer to 2014 when this first came out. And you have a very short bio, so I'd like to read that for everyone. Stephen Z. Berkley, writer, director, producer. So you're all three of those things combined, especially for this film. While Stephen has worked in multiple capacities inside the media industry over 30 years, Life with Ghosts is his first fully self-produced feature film. The story came with the death of Stephen's father, when shortly afterwards his mother began reporting interactions with whom she believed to be Dad's ghosts, a real-life Mrs. Muir situation, which naturally begs the question, are ghosts a real phenomenon or are they merely symptomatic of profound grief? Life with Ghosts is the culmination of a 7-year investigation into the nature of love, loss, and after-death communication, and features 3 survivors' quest for answers. So this is so interesting. I know that a lot of people on here have already seen the documentary. If you haven't, you'll still have an opportunity to do so. But maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the documentary as we get started here, Stephen.
Sure. First, I should say that I was just here 2 years ago. You didn't remember that? I spoke to the group about 2 years ago, and it was very exciting because I had heard so much about helping parents heal. I had heard that, oh, it's very progressive. They would love this movie. You got to check it out. Suzanne Giesemann told me to come here. So I got everybody letting me know that this was the place to be. And then when you invited me, I was very celebratory. So I was probably more excited to be on your program than you are to have me. That's why you don't remember and I do. But it was very exciting for me.
Well, thank you. That's so kind of you. And I know that for us, it was exciting to be able to have you speaking about this documentary that talks about IADC, as well as talking about all of these other things like automatic writing and other things that we have been talking about for many years. And it's exciting that you have this in a film explaining that these people who didn't necessarily believe at all became firm believers in all of this. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about this. It's starting with your mom.
Well, yeah, I'm happy to start with my mom. So here's what happened. My father died, and I guess what brings most people into this space is a death. In this case, it was my father. And my siblings and I, we all congregated in Florida really to just, help out with everything aside from having to say goodbye to our father. We had all the logistical things you have to go through with a loss like that. So we were helping our mom, and then we realized our mom was in such despair, she wasn't really functioning. I mean, nobody functions in that kind of grief, of course. But after a few weeks, we realized that we couldn't return to our own home states with our mother in this condition. And we tried all the traditional things, with, grief counseling and support groups and religious services. Everything you're supposed to do after a death, we did, and nothing had any effect. As most of you probably had that experience too. You try all these different things you heard about, and they don't work, and you start seeking elsewhere. You're opening up to things elsewhere. My mother had a very sweet neighbor named Ethel, and she came over our house, and she said, "Irene, we don't talk about this a whole lot, but I do something to keep in touch with my late husband." By the way, I think I tell this story after my film when the credits are rolling. If any of you stayed long enough for that, um, I may be repeating myself to a lot of you, but that's basically what happened. Um, this cute lady came over and said, "I write to my husband, and it really helps me." And then she leaned in real close to my mom and said, "And he writes back." Uh, Everybody in the house was really annoyed with Ethel, my brothers, and my mother and my brothers, because my mother had just lost my father, and here was this kooky woman coming by with this crazy offer. And, you know, my mother basically threw Ethel out of the house, but I was really interested in Ethel. And went over her to her house, and she showed me that stack of yellow legal pads that's in the film. And she said, "Those yellow legal pads those contain my conversations with my late husband over the past 12 years." And I didn't know if I assumed she had some form of schizophrenia. But as I got to know her better, and at some point I started to like her, and I realized that she wasn't just having these things happen in her life. She was like super smart, and she was grounded. Like, you don't really notice that most people aren't grounded until you meet somebody who is really grounded. You know what I mean? So she was this grounded, wonderful, vibrant 90-year-old woman who was dancing in the fabulous Florida Follies. She was like a semi-professional tap dancer, and she was just awesome. So I liked everything about this lady, and I wanted my mom to get in on the action because my mom was in such despair and nothing else was working. So I said, Ethel does this automatic writing stuff. Maybe you should try it. And my mom was like, Not right now, kid," kind of a thing. But I knew that I thought it was important to stay with it. And in order to justify hanging out with my mother, convincing her that she really should try this, I had to make it I had to get a camera crew down there, and I had to ask them to kind of record this because it seemed to be important, if not for posterity, then just for me and my family. I wanted to have something of this. I record everything naturally. I guess I'm a natural documentarian. I just record conversations. And by the way, if you ever call me, you should know that I'm taping. Okay. I'm kind of like Nixon in that way. So, um, I started recording, and I was recording this cute story between my mom and Ethel, and it wasn't a story, I was just filming them going through their lives and having very different experiences in grief because of their belief systems. And I didn't want to editorialize. I wanted to, by the way, Irene, Elizabeth, if I'm talking too long before waiting for the next question, you let me know, okay?
Of course, this is great though. Keep going.
Okay. So it seemed like a cute story was forming between my mother and Ethel, and it was a sweet story. But when I followed my mother over to her grief counseling session for the first time, well, actually, it was probably the third time, and I'm listening to her talk to her grief counselor, and the grief counselor is being very discouraging about the idea that Ethel had introduced. And here I am thinking, well, there's hope there. Why is this grief counselor just abusing my mother of the notion that she could perhaps continue her relationship with her husband. And I know you guys are all with me because you live this. You know that it's possible and it happens, and there's no reason not to foster that relationship, right? So I I got annoyed. I'm using a euphemism for something much more vulgar, but I got really annoyed. And I didn't understand. So I started to do some research, and I found I talked to a professor who ended up being in the movie named David Hufford from Penn State. And he told me, I could talk to you till the cows come home about this stuff, but what I want you to do, based on where you're at now within your journey, go look up the name Dewey Reese. And then he hung up the phone. So I looked up the name Dewey Reese in Wikipedia, and it turns out there was this physician in the 1970s who was really interested in just gerontology, just how older people are making it through and what they're doing and how they're coping. And he found out that there were people who were having these post-mortem relationships with their spouses. And he decided to ask one simple, he went back in with a team of psychologists this time. All this all happened in Wales. He came in with a team of psychologists and he said, found a doctor's office that had like a very varied practice. It was like one of the biggest ones in Wales, had all different ages, all different like parts of Wales. And this would be a good like population to interview. And he asked one simple question of all the people who agreed to be interviewed. And the question was, what is helping you get through grief the most? And the answer was invariably by everyone who was having this experience of continuing their relationships, that was the answer was getting a visit. Getting a visit helped me get through my grief the most. So he published a paper that got into the UK Journal of Medicine. I mean, it was a major medical journal. He was a physician. He did this study. He did it on 300 widows and widowers. It was a valid study, and it got published. But did it make front page news? If I was a publisher, I would have made that front page news that half the people who were in grief, who were interviewed, had an experience, and it didn't cure them, but what that does to ameliorate the symptoms of grief. And it didn't make big news. So I'm like, this is actually a movie. The fact that didn't make big news, in addition to my mother being discouraged by her therapist to use this therapy, it's more than just about my mom and Ethel. This is about kind of an injustice. We've been Either it's our fault for not being more curious, or it's the media's fault for not like forcing us to be more interested in what's going on in the world. But the fact that that happened in 1971, and nobody made that front page news was astonishing to me. So I kind of wanted the movie to be about that. And I didn't want to editorialize at all. I wanted to get opinions from the rabbi, from the theology professor, from the physicists, from the professors of anthropology. I wanted to get these different varying opinions, and I didn't want any of them to watch the film and say, "Oh, he made me the villain. That's too bad." It turns out that Roger Samuel, the psychiatrist, kind of made himself the villain. I didn't do that on purpose, but I made a really big effort to just tell a very objective story and let the audience decide what might be good for them.
That's a beautiful way to make a documentary. And I must say that it was very frustrating to hear the therapist talk about the fact that this was so crazy, that she was crazy, that she was obviously delusional, and that she must have been having problems to be experiencing this. I remember when Helping Parents Heal first started, I went to London to meet with a mom who was doing automatic writing with her son, and she came with same thing, those yellow notebooks that were just filled with writing from her son. And she's still one of our affiliate leaders in London, Joe Buckmaster, and she is so fascinating. Her daughter is one of the heads of Helping Siblings Heal, and she had been hearing from her son and writing what he was saying for probably a few years before I ever met her. And I think that it is such a great way to communicate with our kids as well as with our husbands or our loved ones in spirit. But um, let's see. Terry is asking, did the psychiatrist see the documentary? If so, did he provide any feedback? That's a good question, Terry. Did he say anything to you about it after?
That's a great question. And what happened was I didn't show the film to Dr. Samuel uh, until recently, even though I kind of finished making the film around the year 2020. And showed it to some of the cast, but not to him for I think obvious reasons. I felt like he was the film's villain. And people ask me repeatedly, like, what does Dr. Samuel say about this film? What does he think? And so finally, when I found out, actually, I was kind of cowardly about it. He found me. He said, I hear this came out. I want to see it. So I sent it to him and I said, do me a favor. I get this question, very Q&A. What does Dr. Samuel think? You have to give me a really good review of the film. Because I kind of kissed his butt a little bit because I knew he was going to be insulted, I felt. So I said, people want to know what Dr. Samuel has to say. Kind of stroked his ego a bit. So he saw the film, he got back to me and he said he liked it. He and his wife watched it, they enjoyed it, but he stood by everything he had said in the session. And then I realized at that moment, and this was corroborated, that he was doing everything a traditional psychiatrist does. He didn't go beyond the bounds. I think the fact that we could see his contempt for her, that was not voluntary. So I don't want to hold that against him, that he did seem to have kind of a contemptuous expression, but everything he was asking her, did you use narcotics? Did you hit your head? I mean, they were almost comically insulting, and yet he was being a traditional psychiatrist. So he stood by everything. He was fine with the movie. You could tell people, I like the movie. And you could also tell people, this movie only proves that people are getting visits in their head.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, well, that's how we interface with the universe, through our heads. Everything comes through our heads, right?
Well, I'd really like to know if he's ever had a loved one pass that was very dear to him, because I think that it might change the way that he thinks about life to have something like that happen, don't you think? I mean, I don't know if you ever discussed that with him, but I just can't imagine um, standing by the fact that it's impossible to be able to communicate with our loved ones in spirit, especially after seeing all of these scientists
Yeah.
that you interviewed, they were all very convincing. And I would love for people who don't know more about IADC to know more about it. We have someone here on Helping Parents Heal who helps parents once a month, Judy Hancock's, and she's waving. She's Irene's sister, and she does amazing work. But maybe you could just give a definition and an explanation about it so that people will know a little bit more about what it is, because it's a big part of the film, and it's so.
It is. But before I give the definition, I want to say this. That particular treatment that was featured for me was emblematic of several modalities that people can choose from. IADC was exciting because it stands for Induced After-Death Communication. And it was exciting because there was a scientific study going on in like the fifth or sixth year of my making the film. So it's like, hey, this is pretty cool. If I could make this part of the film, then there's a scientific reason for people to see it. And that was great credibility. Because I'm a kind of a science lover anyway, and I wanted some science in the movie, and I got more than I bargained for. I got a study that proved the efficacy of continuing our bonds with our loved ones. Anyway, the film, if I were going to say what is it about? It's about continuing bonds. And And IADC is one such therapy. There's also, I could think of two other therapies that are similar. It was born from EMDR. Most people have ever known anything about these trauma therapies. EMDR, I think, is like the number one trauma therapy. And so IADC was born from that. I think the founder just did a couple little tweaks to EMDR, and then he called it his own. And that's basically what it is. It's, you're using bilateral stimulation, which moves the trauma from the language part of the brain to the uh, maybe the motor skills part of the brain. By doing the tapping, bilateral stimulation, it moves, the trauma moves, and that apparently lets the trauma assimilate into the whole being. And that relief that people get in therapy after like two 90-minute sessions, that relief of just having their walls around them kind of crumble and their antenna just shoots up. It seems that our departed loved ones seize upon this opportunity to say hello. And it happens 80% of the time. That's a ridiculously high number for any procedure. And so I thought that was very cool. 100% of the time, according to, I'm just parroting what the therapists have said. 100% of the time, people feel better after the therapy. Their trauma is relieved. 80% of the time, they actually have a visit from their deceased loved one, their departed loved one, I prefer to say. So that's pretty great.
Yeah, Stephen, I often, and when I talk to parents, I believe that trauma and post-traumatic stress are very underlooked at in grief. Some of the most amazing advance for myself in my grief journey was when I did trauma recovery through
Mhm.
this technique. I explain that it takes the charge out of it. The traumatic event doesn't become a loop. You're able to process it and you're able to move forward.
Yes. And
So
Irene, I bet you'll agree with this, that every death is traumatic. It's sudden. Every death is sudden, and a big part of trauma is the suddenness of it, right? It
mhm.
doesn't necessarily have to be a brick hitting you on the head. It's just that change, that suddenness. And some people have PTSD after their husbands have been in dialysis for a couple of years and they die and all the shock of them just not being there. But of course, with the slower, the prolonged deaths, it's not quite as traumatic. But every death is too soon. And I love what the authors of I Wasn't Ready to Say Goodbye, they were in my film. They said to me that they came up with that title because they both felt that way, or the co-authors both felt that way. But the reason why it stuck is because it turned out that it seemed that everybody they spoke to, it was always too soon to say goodbye. It always felt that way for everyone they spoke to. So yeah.
Well, and I remember the last time that we spoke to you, the mom whose husband passed when he was playing racquetball, and it was very sudden as well. Um, we wanted to know how she was doing, and I think that you had lost touch with her after the movie was made. Is that correct? And so you didn't have a lot of information about how she's doing. I was going to just see if you've heard anything from her since.
Wait, I did because just in March of this year, I
Okay.
had a screening in my neighborhood. I had not seen the film on the big screen yet, and a local guy said, "I hear this won all this awards. My mother loves your podcast. Let's put it in the theater, in our local theater." I was like, "Great. I haven't seen it yet in the big theater." So I invited her and her family, and she ended up inviting all her extended family. So it was pretty great for them because they had like a little family reunion. They had like 30 people in like the balcony. It was just the Beersworth family. And yeah, I got to see her again. I got to see the kids and who are now, adults. And it was very nice. And I didn't get a chance. Well, I do know where Karen is kind of mentally, emotionally now, but I feel almost like she's no longer part of the movie, so I kind of want to respect her privacy. I will say that the therapy worked for her, but if you remember from the movie, she held on to the pain was kind of a surrogate for her husband, and that's true for lots
Mhm.
of people. And that,
Exactly. Yeah, I was so fascinated by hearing that because I think that that is something that a lot of people do go through, that they don't want to let go of the pain because they feel like they're letting go of the person, which is exactly the opposite of what we like to think when we're um, communicating with our kids in spirit, that we are moving forward with them by communicating with them. And I also was just saying to Irene before this interview that it must be hard for her family members, or at that time it must have been very hard because of the fact that she had held on to this sadness for such a long time. But I understand, and I think that it's important to respect her privacy. In fact, it's almost, it's almost amazing to think that all of these people were doing these exercises very candidly for the documentary, and that we really got to see into their lives so clearly. And it almost felt as though this almost can't be real. This must be actors, but they're true people. Your mother's in it, and maybe you could tell a little bit about your mom, because you were telling us about what happened right at the end of the movie.
sure, sure. Um, yes, first I love that you brought that up about the real people, because there are no recreations, but people, because I made the movie pretty because I loved what I was filming, and I wanted to make these 80 and 90-year-old ladies look as best they could, and I wanted the film to look pretty for that reason, and for just because I like pretty things. Like as a filmmaker, I like pretty films. But it shouldn't have been a pretty film. It should have been a gritty film. It would have felt more real to people, and people wouldn't assume these are reenactments if it was a little bit more gritty. And I just had one take, and that was it. But sometimes something happens during a scene. I call it a scene. I was filming real life, but a waiter comes and interrupts, and I had to kind of ask them to repeat part of part of their conversation, so whatever about they say makes sense, because now the waiter ruined it, whatever it was. So I shouldn't have done that, because some scenes came out a little bit stagey, and it shouldn't have. These are all real conversations with real people. So yes, I made it look pretty, but I shouldn't have. But I do like the way the movie looks.
That looks beautiful, but
I didn't answer your question about my mother.
yeah.
Um, my mother and Ethel. Okay, so on the very last shot of the film was a shot where Ethel is automatic riding for the first time. And the film was for the first time, but we actually shot that scene, the very last scene. Ethel died the next morning. So she died, she died the morning after, the hours after we wrapped the film. So it seemed like she was willing to wait for us. She had also told us, Yosha told me candidly that she expected to die very soon because her husband said that she was ready, and he knew that she was going to be joining him soon. So he had written to her, and she had automatic written, okay, it looks like I'm going to be leaving soon. So I think that happened within just months of her actually leaving. So I was kind of prepared, but not, because one of the most vibrant people I've ever known. My mom died just 3 weeks before that. So they died very close proximity, right at the end of principal photography.
So that leads into the next question that we have here, asking if you have had any communication yourself. So have you been able to speak to Ethel or to your mom since they've passed, or to
I've spoken to
anyone?
my mom, I've spoken to Ethel, but usually with the help, I've done some myself, but usually with the help of a medium. Because since I came up with the film, and then I started a podcast and started interviewing mediums on the podcast, it seems now that my friends are mediums. So it's really, and we have mutual friends too, because we've interviewed the same people. So I usually ask for their help if I want to talk, or usually they volunteer it. Like I'm just talking to them. They go, "Hey, your buddy's here, Jeffrey." So I'll talk to Jeffrey. So yes, I've spoken to everybody, and the cool thing is when I first came here 2 years ago, uh, I was a different person because I was just came out with a movie and I was trying to appear as objective as I could because the film is objective, and I want to kind of deliver it as an objective piece of journalism. And I didn't kind of like let anybody lead you to believe that I was, a believer. I wanted to keep people guessing, so I wasn't quite as forthright as I am now. But now I'm talking regularly to my departed, and I could say that very openly and candidly now because it's happening a lot. It feels very, it feels very good to be able to share it with a group. I know this is a safe room. I get that feeling this is a safe room.
It
Um,
Oh,
is.
yeah, it is.
uh,
You're
so,
preaching to the
you know,
choir.
and of course I ask like when I'm going to be interviewed and I'm feeling like maybe I want company, I'll ask my best friend Jeffrey. I have four people on the other side who are very close to me. But the one I usually kind of come in for like, just to keep me company, during something like this. And so I could feel him with me. And that's awesome.
It's wonderful. And I just want to tell you that Debbie is saying I didn't think it was stagey at all. I didn't either. I just was so
No.
amazed when we interviewed you the first time to realize that these were all real people and that you didn't even necessarily know um, what had happened in their lives after the filming happened. So, which is almost even further proof that this was just not at all staged, obviously, because you have no idea.
Right.
Um, but it is pretty interesting to think that she came to the film with her whole family, was able to see this, and I know that people who haven't watched the film yet might be kind of wondering what we're talking about. But hopefully, if you haven't watched it yet, you'll be able to watch it in the next 2 days. I believe it's 2 days that are still available. Is that right?
Yeah, I thought we agreed till Saturday, but then I just made it Sunday morning. We'll leave it up.
Okay.
How's that sound?
Which is wonderful. So if people are wanting to be able to watch the film um, again as well, it'll still be available. And and I think it's fascinating too that you are working on other projects. Are you willing to say what your next project you're hoping to do might be? Just because you don't have to, but I was fascinated.
Well, I'm hopeful that Gary Schwartz, who's developing the cell phone technology, will choose me as his documentarian. He has not yet, but that seems like a very exciting thing to do. I mean, he's having dialogue with Albert Einstein. That's pretty great.
Well,
And
he's expressed interest in having you do it. He just needs to get organized to be able to do it, I believe, because he has a lot of other things, a lot of other irons in the fire. But I think that that would be a fascinating documentary.
he's one of the busiest guys out there. And we get along very well. Like I've interviewed him a couple of times now, and I feel like a kindred spirit kind of a thing with him. Um, but I can't speak for him. I think he likes me, but I don't know if he's going to choose me.
Well,
Mm.
in any
Stephen, I wanted to ask you because I found this so fascinating, and so many of our parents struggle with this. It was more in the beginning of the film when you talked about religion, and when one of the daughters spoke to I think he was a theologian, or I don't know if it was a priest at the college,
Theologian,
and
yes.
then one of the women, one of your mom's friends, spoke to the rabbi, and both of them talked about not contacting the dead. And then I don't know if it was Paul Selig or Joe Dispenza talked about that's not what religion says at all. So if you could just touch on that a little bit.
Sure. I'm trying to remember which professor said which, but I remember that,
It was at the college. One of her daughters was going to
right.
college, and
So
she decided she wanted
right.
to try to contact her dad.
So I was thinking of the academics who were just commenting on what was happening, but you're
Yeah.
talking about the theologian himself. So that was Ono Eka at Sacred Heart University. Um,
Mhm.
Very nice guy, but he firmly believes that people should just have faith that they are going to reunite, but it's really the design. that things are set up to separate. The veil is there for a reason, he was basically saying. Let's respect that. And it's hard to, I guess it's hard for somebody in his position has all that training and he has all this upbringing, and some people believe, will say that it's inscribed in us that at birth how devout we're going to be, for some people. So he might be just one of those people who, even if someone came to visit him after death, he might just assume it's an hallucination, or that he should not entertain any kind of dynamic ongoing with that spirit, which is too bad. But yeah. But
Yeah, and I think the rabbi said that as well.
the rabbi said something else. The rabbi said something had the same effect, Irene, right?
Right.
The effect
Yeah.
was don't do it. But what he was saying was there is a division of Judaism. They study Kabbalah, and Kabbalah is the mystical sect, and it's a small part of Judaism. But he said, in general, Judaism is a this world religion. You don't want to
Mhm.
try to bridge the gap just because it's not, you're not living in this world, you're living in that world too. And he was kind of frowning upon that. I think it's the coolest thing in the world to be in two different worlds at the same time. Don't you?
Yeah, and I think that's why organized religion is not as popular as it had been,
Yeah.
has been.
So do you feel like it's crumbling quickly now? Is it accelerating?
Oh, I
I
think,
do.
yeah, everything's accelerating, definitely. I think the veil is becoming thinner, as you were talking about the veil, obviously. I think that people are having a much easier time from the very start connecting with their loved ones in spirit
Hmm.
when they have a loved one pass. I think that before, maybe because of all of the ideology, the religious backgrounds that maybe people had before, kept people from being able to communicate as quickly as possible with their loved ones. But I truly believe that it's the only way to heal from the passing of a loved one is to be able to be communicating with them. And I also believe that this is this is the reason that we say in Helping Parents Heal that it is possible to heal from the passing of a loved one because we can communicate with them. And I I see that there are people asking about automatic writing in the chat box. We have a group of Helping Parents Heal. It's an affiliate group that's called Connecting with Our Loved Ones in Spirit that was started by Mary Burton, who wrote a book on automatic writing, and she comes back very frequently to teach classes. But that specific group of Helping Parents Heal um, talks about automatic writing very frequently, so, and teaches it. So anyway, I just wanted to let the people who are asking about it know that. And maybe you know a little bit more about ways to learn automatic writing. Is it only this Ethel that you've ever heard of that does the automatic writing, or is it something that you may do as well? Do you ever do that kind of
Yeah,
modality?
I've tried it. I don't feel like I'm a good candidate for like very successful automatic writing. I just find writing uncomfortable. Um, and I know that somebody told me that it could work on a keyboard, but I know Ethel was really high on handwriting, automatic writing. It doesn't come easy for me, but I've done it, and I think I rather just receive. I'd rather just receive and enjoy the receiving and not worry about recording it, even though I know recording it is kind of important and sometimes that facilitates it. But yeah, I'd rather just receive right now.
Well, could you tell us, obviously this had to do a little bit with your mom in the very
Mhm.
beginning, but before all of this, had you had any contact with people who are interested in connecting with loved ones in spirit, or was it only because of the fact that this woman, Ethel, came over to your house and said that she could speak to her own husband and that she could teach your mom how to do the same thing that you became interested in this?
It was the latter. I consider myself not a materialist, but I feel I'm a very practical, rational person. I'm open. I'm open to lots of things. And I remember when John Edward first came on the scene, and I was very interested in his program. I used to watch it with my now wife. Um, and so I was open to it and I enjoyed it, but it kind of stopped there. I wasn't going to research it further. It wasn't that interesting to me, I suppose. But when my mom was having these interactions and she was criticized by her therapist, I mean, those things had to happen for me to be like, wow, let's really check this out.
That's fascinating. And it's so interesting to me too that you talk about Ethel as being someone who is so deeply spiritual. So you obviously had a connection with her from the very beginning as well.
Yeah, well, I guess at the time I was enjoying her, which or met her, which was probably 2000 and let's say 2011. Um, there weren't a lot of people in her community that she was able to talk about this openly with. Now there are just because of passage of time. But at the time, I was probably one of a handful. And she told me that she did automatic writing for a few of her friends, but then they started asking too often for her help. And then her late husband kind of put a stop to it, said, everybody's got to come through me now. I'm a guard. I'm guarding you because they're exhausting you.
Yeah,
So she started filtering people out. But I didn't know anything about automatic writing. I believed Ethel and I believed what she was doing. And I at some point I fell in love with her. She was just an awesome person.
that's amazing. Well, we have so many people on here, actually affiliate leaders who practice automatic writing as well. I'm wondering, I see that we have quite a few questions about how to do this. I just wanted to see too if we have any other questions for, let's see, Marina is asking, how can we find people who are really trained in IADC? So, let's see.
Yeah, Candy put a link to the IADC
So there's a direct,
page. Yes, there's a direct link there.
Yeah, and if, yeah, exactly. And there's one on my website too. I'm not going to give that out right now. I was going to tell you.
and
Just sorry.
go ahead.
No, I wanted to ask, how can we find your podcast, Stephen? And how can you want to talk
Oh,
about that just a little bit for people?
so my website is Life with Ghosts, and that's the movie's name. Life with Ghosts is lifewithghosts.com is the website. And there's a link for a podcast page. So all the podcasts I've done so far, I do two podcasts a month. The first Monday of every month is a live podcast. And that's been going great. I just started it, I think a year ago, July, and we usually have about 300 people show up live and anywhere between 2,000 and 15,000 watch the replay. So people seem to like it. And basically I have all the guests are people who know something about living with ghosts, either people who are teach transpersonal psychology or people who are mediums or clinicians who used after-death communication in their healing practice. So I try to have like a variety of guests, and I'm very excited because, well, December's guest will be Barbara Banner, who's a medium I hadn't heard of before, but she seems to be very good. She's new to mediumship, it seems, but she's like a natural. And Neil Donald Walsh will be my January guest. So I'm excited
Ah,
about that because Conversations with God was
cool.
like the first. You were going to say something, Elizabeth?
no, Irene was just saying something. It's funny. Barbara is one of our Helping Parents Heal mediums as well. But just recently she became one actually. And
Mhm.
Neil Donald Walsh, that's exciting as well. That's
Have you interviewed him yet?
no, but we interviewed Irene. Um, a good friend of his who did a movie with Robin Williams, and I swear my daughter, as you know,
Oh
just had a
gosh.
baby, so I've lost my mind. His name is Stephen. Um, he's done so many
What
different
dreams may come. It
things.
was let me look him
And
up.
so his one of his closest friends is Neil Donald Walsh. And the reason that he did that film was because of him. And so I think it's interesting that you're going to be interviewing him. And yeah, he sounds fascinating. And let's see, we have lots of people saying, I love the podcasts in the chat box. Also, let's see,
It's Stephen Simon, Elizabeth. Just
Stephen,
Stephen Simon. Yeah.
I'm sorry. So Stephen's wife passed after he'd made this movie, and she was quite a bit younger than he was. So they had already talked about after-death communication before she passed, because he thought that he was going to pass a long time before she did. Um, she started communicating with him almost immediately, and they wrote this book together, which is called What Dreams Have Passed. So it's based on the film. I mean, the title is, and he's so fascinating.
Yeah.
He's somebody that you
He
should.
is. What dreams have come. And the one thing that we really loved about when we interviewed him, if any of you have watched that movie, there's one really scary scene in the movie that we don't like at all. And he wanted it taken out of the movie, and they wouldn't allow him to do so.
The
So we were
producers
very
put
happy about that.
it in there so that they could make it more sellable, and
Yeah. Hollywood.
he put it in there, but he doesn't believe that way, which really made us feel good. So, but that movie is based on the writings of Neil Donald Walsh,
Mm.
Donald Walsh.
one of his good friends. But I was um, I was just going to say too that let's see. I'm sorry. Michelle is saying we can communicate with our loved ones, and while the church and science frowned upon that, HPH helped to normalize it, which is the gateway to healing. Stephen's movie is a gift to a community of anyone in grief, which is true. I mean, it's so wonderful to be able to see that kind of in a nutshell. All of these different experts that you've interviewed and that you've been able to find out, and to be able to see the way that people's opinions changed through the movie. And
Mhm.
um, I am just fascinated to think that all of this came about just because of the fact that this woman came over after your father passed and talked to your mother about automatic writing. Again, I also just wanted to say Joanna Buckmaster, Buckmaster has done meetings for Helping Parents Heal that are recorded. So people can go and watch those to learn more about automatic writing. But also, Mary Burton's book is called The 21 Day Doorway Across the Veil. And thank you, Candy, for writing that in there. And that's an amazing book as well. And I, again, it's wonderful to see all of these modalities put to use in this documentary that you have created. Um, so the next project might be something with Gary Schwartz. Is there anything else that you're planning on doing besides these podcasts?
Um, there's a lot I'd like to do. I just did a TED Talk, TEDx talk, I'm supposed to say. The X is important. Um, and because I like the idea of talking about this. I like to be, I like, it turns out I like going in front of audiences live and talking on this topic. I'm not an expert though in anything related to this. I'm just somebody who's filmed it and spoken to experts. So in a way, I don't have the gravitas maybe that, that the public speaker needs, but I love it. I love talking to live audiences. I guess I'm a little bit of a ham. And I'm doing summits also, inviting speakers to speak before live audiences. And what else am I doing? Um, Trying to get the film on PBS. I got to get some sponsors. I've been looking for sponsors. Actually, I have not been looking hard enough for sponsors. If anybody out there knows of anybody who wants to associate their name with this film, uh, let me know. I'm looking for maybe a foundation or something like that to say, we'll help you out, kid. Um,
Great.
and what
Well,
else?
I I wanted to tell you too that Debbie's saying I was so thankful to Karen's daughter for asking her. She was so courageous to have a conversation with her mom about trying IADC, which is true. She's an incredible young woman. I hope that she realizes that she is so brave to be able to do that, because um, she may have just not only changed her mom's life, but her whole family's life by doing
Yeah,
that.
for sure. And I feel like I got kind of lucky with finding this family. I mean, these family are connected to my family very tangentially. Um, and this trio, these mom and these two daughters, are so tight. And it's just it's a beautiful thing to be able to be a part of.
That's so wonderful. Judith Hancock is wanted to share that repair and retachment grief therapy is an extension and variation of IADC that is a full day of honoring and connecting with loved ones using EMDR. Rochelle Wright attended Alan Botkin's workshop for IADC and developed her method first named Guided Afterlife Connections. So maybe you know of Rochelle Wright and Alan Botkins as well. Have
I
you?
do. I think it's
Yeah, Alan was in the film.
Oh yeah, Alan was in the violet. Yes, exactly.
I love that Alan kind of took EMDR and made it his own. And then when Rochelle Wright took IADC and made it her own, he had a problem with that. But that's what people do, right? Everything's derivative of something else. So everybody's coming, but it's great because with repair and reattachment therapy, you don't have to be a licensed counselor. And because of that, it's easier to get. So if you can't get somebody to
Mm.
help you with IADC, which yes, it has scientific backing support now behind it, but these kinds of therapies like repair and reattachment therapy, I mean, if they work, they work. So I encourage people to find what's available to them.
That's wonderful. And let's see. I again, I'm excited about learning more about your podcast. So, how many do you have so far? How many have you produced of the podcast?
I've only been doing one live podcast per month, and I just started doing a second one per month. So I only have like 25 maybe, something like that.
That's pretty many already. So, this is exciting to be able to go and look at these podcasts. And thank you for telling us about them. And
Sure.
it's been wonderful to speak to you this evening as well. And Irene, do you have any other questions for Stephen before? And Stephen, do you have any other information that you'd like to share with us before we close?
I just want to, well, at first, I want to invite everybody to the interview with Donald Walsh. If you're interested in seeing him, you're welcome to stop by. Um, and uh, we just have to go to lifewithghosts.com to figure out how to register and to do all that. And the other thing I was going to say was I want to just give you and Irene props again, and everybody that's part of your organization, because I feel like you got a ball rolling. I mean, maybe it was rolling a little bit already, but your organization and the way you operate was both very brave and very cool. And I think a lot of other grief associations are kind of catching wind and they're realizing that they should be more progressive or think outside the box a little bit themselves. And so I just give you so much credit. I'm doffing my cap to you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's
Elizabeth started it all. She really did. She was a pioneer. Well, Morgan did.
well, no, it has nothing to do
Yes.
with Irene or me or any of us. It has everything to do with the kids. And I really truly believe that every single day that we wake up, everything that happens and anything that happens for all of the parents in the group is because the kids are making that happen. They're the ones that are setting the ball rolling. And it is, it's pretty incredible. I mean, it's a magical journey once you start down that path of understanding that, first of all, this journey is all about love. Second of all, this is such a small part of the whole picture. And so our kids are happy, healthy, and home, and we're still in school. So we're learning so many things right now. And everything that we're learning is going to be important later on. We signed up for this before we ever got here. That's always hard to imagine because sometimes this life can be incredibly hard. This Earth school is the hardest of any place in the universe, but here we are, and we're doing a pretty good job. So we should all pat ourselves on the back and realize that that because of what we're doing, all of our kids are extremely proud. All of our loved ones in spirit are extremely proud. Your mom's very proud as well, Stephen, as well as.
Thank you for saying that.
Yes, that we can continue to have a relationship with our loved ones in spirit.
I got a funny thing to
It's
share
not
with
the
you.
one we want.
The closing minute, I got a funny thing I want to share with you. When my mother came through to me for the first time through automatic writing was through Ethel, close to her final days. My mother came through because my mother had just only died 3 weeks before Ethel, right? So we were doing a scene. I was asking Ethel to just automatic write something just because I had to get a shot of her. And she wrote, I said, ask her, you know, Irene, are you here? And she wrote, Irene, are you here? And then she said, oh, your mother's here. I said, okay, let's talk. And my mother and I got to have a conversation just a few weeks after she passed through Ethel. And my mother said something that's very emblematic of my mother. My mother had this like, you know how Yogi Berra would say things that were just things you don't forget, like that that respite. I'm gonna botch the joke, but a Yogi Berraism is this. My mother said apparently through Ethel, tell Steve that I'm having a great time. I highly recommend this place. And that's just something my mother would say.
Adorable. Yeah,
That's wonderful.
I think that it makes all of us feel really good to hear that your mother would highly recommend this place because she's adorable. She was adorable in the movie, and so was Ethel. And so it's wonderful to hear that she likes it over there. Well, over there, but right beside us at the same time. But in any case, thank you so much for sharing this evening with us. And everyone's saying thank you as well in the chat box. Let's see. Oh, Wendy Safel is saying a 5-star rating for the Afterlife from Stephen's mom.
And then some, yeah.
Anyway,
wonderful.
Thanks so much again. We always ask everyone to unmute and say thank you and good evening. So if you guys would like to unmute, go ahead and do so.
Thanks so much, Stephen. This was great. Great night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen.
Looking forward to
Good night, everybody.
Take care.